Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm seeing a bunch of people filing in, and we're a few minutes late, so I'll just get us started now. Thank you for joining us this morning. You are attending the session Comprehensive Planning in the 21st Century, Sustainable, Resilient, and Equitable. And today your presenters are Rocky Piero and David Rouse. My name is Lauren Plattman, and I will be assisting with the session today. If you do have questions during the presentation, please add them to the chat box, and we'll be doing our best to answer them at the end of the presentation. And then if you do have any additional questions or would just like more information, you may contact the panelists using the FeedLoop platform at the end of the presentation. So now I'll pass it off to our panelists to get us started.
So thanks so much, Lauren. So I'm Rocky Piero. I'm going to do some quick introductions and then hand it over to David to do the first part of the presentation here. So my colleague and friend here, David Rouse, is a consultant, educator, researcher, and author with over 40 years of experience in urban and regional planning. He's joining us today from Pennsylvania. He served from 2013 to 2019 as the Managing Director of Research and Advisory Services for the American Planning Association. He co-led the effort that the association put together for the Sustaining Places initiative with the late David Gottschalk. David, prior to joining APA, was a principal at the firm of Wallace, Roberts, and Todd in Philadelphia. Many of his projects have had awards for their excellence. His areas of expertise include comprehensive planning, which we'll chat about today, parks and open space, green infrastructure, and planning for emerging technologies. And I'm Rocky Piero. I'm here in Colorado, so I direct the Colorado Center for Sustainable Urbanism at the CU Denver campus, and am an associate professor in the College of Architecture and Planning. I served as the manager for Denver's Planning and Community Development Department, and also as program manager for a number of years out in Seattle with the Puget Sound Regional Council's Growth Management Division. I continue to serve on the board of the International Urban Planning and Environment Association and have been real active with APA as well. Right now I'm on the AICP exam committee, and I'm the past chair of the Regional and Intergovernmental Planning Division. So I earned my master's here at CU Denver and did doctoral studies and got my doctorate at University of Washington out in Seattle. So David will cover the next few slides where we discuss why the book is needed now, and then I'll walk through some of the initial parts of the book, and then David will come back on and discuss the concluding sections of the book and lead into our question and answer discussion. So thank you very much. Oops, there we are. So you can see what we look like. And David, I'll turn it over to you here.
Thanks, Rocky, for that welcome and overview. And it's great to be with you all in Colorado, and I haven't even left my home office in outside Philadelphia. So that's one of the advantages of virtual technology. We've got a lot to cover in the next hour, and Rocky touched on this. You can see the agenda here. First, I'm going to speak to why we think this book is needed now and give some background on APA's Sustaining Places initiative, which is really where the book all started and ended up and what it's ended up being. Then Rocky's going to start, and I'm going to finish a whirlwind tour of the contents of the book. And we have to go through this fast. There's going to be a lot of stuff, but we're going to throw at you, but don't worry about it. The book will be coming out shortly if you're interested in finding out more. And I'm going to end with some thoughts about the future of the comprehensive plan, which are taken from the book's concluding chapter. And we haven't run through this presentation before, but hopefully we're going to have some time left for questions and discussion. Next.
Okay.
So let's start with why this book is needed now. We're all familiar with 21st century challenges like technological change, inequity, socioeconomic inequality, climate change, environmental degradation. And the conventional comprehensive planning model we're all familiar with is rooted in 20th century planning practices that are inadequate to meet these challenges in the 21st century. But there is a new comprehensive planning model emerging, one that's not addressed in the current comprehensive planning literature as far as Rocky and I can ascertain. So what we tried to do in this book is to provide detailed guidance on this model, on how to create comprehensive plans to help communities become more sustainable, resilient, and equitable. Next. So some background on the Sustaining Places Initiative. This initiative began with an announcement at the World Urban Forum in 2010 by then APA President Bruce Knight and CEO Paul Farmer. And what it did was focus on the role of the local comprehensive plan in promoting sustainability, first through a task force and then a working group that developed standards and best practices for comp plans, which were called the Comprehensive Plan Standards for Sustaining Places, or more easily said, standards for short. The co-chairs of the task force were Bill Anderson and the late Dave Gottschalk, who Rocky mentioned, who played a lead role in developing and disseminating the standards. I had the privilege of working with Dave on the initiative, starting as a volunteer member of the original task force and continuing through my time as APA research director when Dave and I co-wrote the PS report, Sustaining Places, Best Practices for Comprehensive Plans. You can see the cover there on the slide. So next, Rocky. The standards reflect the evolution of the Sustaining Places initiative from a focus on sustainability to a truly comprehensive guide to comprehensive planning practice. And as such, they're organized around 10 components, 6 principles, 2 processes, and 2 attributes. And the principles, which are listed here on this slide, address the substance of the comprehensive plan. The 2 processes are authentic participation, community engagement in the plan, and accountable implementation. And the 2 attributes, which Dave Gottschalk referred to as plan-making design standards, are consistent content and coordinated characteristics. And each of these 10 components had planning action tools defined for them, somewhere from 8 to 10. And these are best practices to be incorporated into the comprehensive plan and move forward these principles, process, and attributes. And the overall framework is designed as a national benchmark against which an existing or new comprehensive plan can be measured. So this framework and the principles, process, attributes, best practices, as I said, is a starting point for what we developed in the book. So if you move on to the next slide, Rocky, I'd like to highlight quickly 4 key features of the book. First, as I mentioned, it focuses on the role of the comprehensive plan in advancing sustainability and resilience and equity. That's a consistent theme throughout the book. Second, it incorporates a systems approach in which a community is considered a system comprised of interconnected subsystems. So that's what this figure, which is taken from the book, illustrates. And this approach contrasts with a conventional comprehensive planning model, which we're familiar with, which is a plan that's comprised of separate discrete elements, things like land use, transportation, economic development, which are often prepared by different subject matter experts. Third, our research of comprehensive plans, and this will come as no surprise to planners, revealed that implementation is the weakest aspect of the typical plan. So a major focus of the book is on what it takes to effectively implement a comprehensive plan to achieve real world results. And finally, Rocky and I reviewed literally dozens of temporary comprehensive plans, and we provide many examples of leading edge practices throughout the book. So go to the next, Rocky. And so here's a map showing locations of the plans we cite in the book, including several from Colorado. And as an overall comment, while we found there are many excellent plans out there, we found some outstanding examples, we can't really say we found any that fully exemplify the range of practices from process to substance to implementation that we describe in the book. So we feel there's more growth and development to be made in comprehensive planning practice. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rocky to begin the book tour.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so we start the first part of the book there. You can see on this title slide here, the planning process. I mean, some of the content of this portion of the book will be familiar to most planners, while other aspects we have are new or re-envisioned, following up on what David just talked to you about in terms of our overall intent and purpose with the book. Oops, go this way. We really focus on issues around different pre-planning tasks, if you will, here before you actually get into the meat of the plan. And we particularly lift up what David already mentioned, genuine, authentic, and transparent community engagement throughout the planning process, from inception, crafting alternatives, to adoption, implementation, and monitoring here. So this slide you see here is a model. This is actually developed by planning engagement courses at CU Denver, which again really demonstrates how comprehensive public participation should play out throughout the planning process here. So there's a strong emphasis on engagement with the entire community throughout the process, a more democratic foundation with equity, diversity, and inclusivity. And again, we're offering this really as an alternative to some of the traditional top-down or limited information sharing models that have been commonplace over the years with regard to community engagement. Here's an image of the full process that we've already introduced you to. Again, a key takeaway with this image is to show the foundation of community engagement throughout the entire planning process through implementation and monitoring. The next chapter here, we talk a little bit about where we have been, legacies of the past here, aspirations that the community might have. We also look at what the future may be like, again, with information gathering, data, doing inventory work. This helps us to understand the community, the environment in which you're doing the plan, what it would look like with or without planning in play here. So drivers of change are a way to lift up some of the various challenges and opportunities that we're seeing in 21st century communities. David gave you a quick overview of why this book is needed. And here you can see some more detailed information that go beyond a lot of the traditional areas of focus we've had, where comprehensive plans traditionally have focused on primarily spatial patterns. So bringing that all together here. Next, as we continue in part one here with the process, we address the importance of having a vision statement, developing goals. Here we run through just some of the key things that should be considered with the development of a vision statement. Keep it concise, easy to understand, easy to explain and discuss it in the community. And as David said, we've looked at a lot of jurisdictions throughout the US. I think we showcase like 64 contemporary comp plans that are rather pioneering, but we bring in examples from dozens of other communities beyond that 64. Asheville is probably the one that comes closest with having gone through this entire paradigm change from, you know, a siloed element by element approach to its comprehensive plan to really working with the guiding principles from the Sustaining Places initiative. And then the final chapter in this section brings together many of the points that we've just talked about. So again, lifting up community engagement, going through the process of crafting and analyzing scenarios with the community, with your decision makers, with other individuals with expertise here, and recognizing the value of the land use map as a visual tool for the plan. So one of the Colorado communities that we showcase in the book is Aurora, and their Aurora Places comprehensive plan adopted in 2019. It's really a great example of an integrated sustainability plan. And you see here with this particular image, what they're doing with their place typology is really an intriguing way of bringing together various issues around the natural environment, economic opportunity, their mobility system, and expressing it with the built environment and their place typology here. All right, part two really gets into the meat of the plan here. So the substance, this is the core of the book here, probably something planners in particular would really zoom in on. You can see we're working, oops, okay, I lost a slide there, David. So, but we'll go ahead and move into the section on the natural systems here. As David mentioned, we're working with a systems approach. We borrow heavily from the economic or from the natural ecosystems work of natural sciences here. We see that there's value with this more comprehensive and integrated approach to planning for the natural environment, but also for the built environment, and that carries through to socio and economic systems as well. So for us, the ecosystems approach is a way to really identify all of those various aspects of the natural environment, the interface that we have as humans with needing these various aspects of nature to be functional and as healthy as possible. I'll zero in a little bit on our emphasis on the importance of identifying and regulating critical areas and resource lands, that is environmentally sensitive areas, that should really be a prominent part of developing your comprehensive plan. Just with one of those elements, again, we're a little time strapped here this morning, but the One Water approach, many of you who have been involved with the various alliances and working groups here in Colorado are familiar with this being lifted up with the state water plan and what is happening more and more with local planning here. This framework was advanced by the U.S. Water Alliance and its partners, including the American Planning Association. You know, it's really, again, if you look at these various elements, it really shows you the intersection of planning with nature and its interface with various aspects of the built environment. So chapter 7 and 8, we deal with built environment systems. So these are the more traditional areas of focus for comprehensive plans that planners would be familiar with. Chapter 7, we focus on land use and development patterns as well as community character. You can see here again, we're talking in a systems approach too, with built environment and the whole notion of complete communities. This is something that's germane for large communities, small communities, urban, rural, neighborhoods, suburbs, and a strong emphasis that each and every community should be all it can be for today's residents and generations to come as well here. The next chapter then continues with built environment, but focuses on mobility and infrastructure. The treatment of mobility really lifts up and emphasizes the notion of mobility for all, so that complete communities need comprehensive mobility systems. We go into some detail about various aspects of evolving our transportation network through attention to complete streets, green streets, living streets, and context-sensitive design. After we've worked through those various systems, we move on to social systems. And here you can see we're dealing with issues of equity, environmental justice, social infrastructure, and the important concept of housing for all. which, clearly a challenge we're facing in Colorado, along the I-25 corridor, within the resort communities along the I-70 corridor, and throughout the state here. Not unique to Colorado, just a challenge throughout the country right now in terms of ensuring that we do have housing for all people in the community. Social infrastructure may be a new concept for some people. That really includes the facilities and activities which support community activities. So we're talking here about community and recreational centers, libraries, schools, public safety and health facilities, and so on, and the important role they play in making a community whole. We then move into the economic systems, and there's an emphasis here on economic resilience and economic opportunity. I'll move on to this next image here. So again, we're lifting up once again a paradigm change here. We're discussing evolving from the traditional 20th century approach to economic development, which is a lot more linear, results in a lot of waste and byproduct here, to more circular approaches to the economy that emphasize the reuse of materials, local and resource-based economic opportunity, and other green practices here. Finally, I'm going to cover the chapter on health, and then David will take over to wrap it up here with the final sections of the book. So again, we lift up the importance of integrating health into community design and planning. So how do we bring health into all policies, similar to what we presented in a few of the earlier slides on including climate considerations and factors in all policies, equity in all policies. One of the things we include in the book, again, another Colorado product here. So from the Colorado Healthy Places Collaborative, I know many of you with the American Planning Association chapter here in the state helped us with this, along with about 24 other partner groups, the Urban Land Institute, the American Civil Engineers Association, American Institute of Architects, Colorado chapter. And the Health Lens is a comprehensive tool that can be used in developing plans. Again, this is a rich tool to use throughout the community engagement process. Its intent is multiples, that it can be used with plan development, evaluating projects and programs that you may have in your community. And this resource and many others are online and accessible. I think we actually have a link to this whole series of products through the APA Colorado website. So I'm going to turn it back over to David now to cover the remaining content of the book.
Thanks, Rocky. You went through that really well. So we've got a little bit more time than I was expecting. Could you just go back to the previous slide? Because I wanted to lift up a couple of things that you said.
Please.
Yeah. And just thinking about, again, part one of the book was about the planning process. Part two is about which Rocky has covered, and I'll conclude with the concluding chapter is about the substance of the book, and the last substance, excuse me, of the plan. And the last section, which I'll get to in a moment, is about implementation. But I thought this was a good image to highlight an important aspect of the book and the approach to comprehensive planning. Again, the way we're going through this chapter by chapter implies these are separate topics, but they're not. They're systems. That's why each chapter treats them as natural or built environment systems, et cetera. And they're all interconnected and interrelated. So this health assessment lens kind of illustrates that. So you see aspects of economic resilience, healthy homes and buildings, et cetera. And health actually is an overarching theme that cuts across all the systems, and the systems, all the systems working together contribute to health. And if you move to the next slide, Rocky, and regional connections is also, this is the last chapter of part two. also cuts across all of these sections. And the traditional comprehensive plans often gave short shrift or even ignored regional connections. They're written as if the jurisdiction stops at its boundaries, and we know that's not true. So a couple of concepts to highlight here on regional connections is first is the importance of regional coordination and cooperation to address those many issues that transcend jurisdictional boundaries. So quickly, coordination involves aligning policy and action recommendations with those of adjacent jurisdictions in the region as a whole. And cooperation refers to working together on common initiatives, for example, developing a regional open space network. And I know Denver metropolitan region has a great open space network. And second is a notion that systems like water, mobility, and infrastructure also transcend jurisdictional boundaries, and that planning for these systems by a local government needs to address their broader regional context. So move on to the next slide, Rocky. This figure captures this idea of planning across scales. So you can see that includes federal and state mandate and policy directions that drive planning and policy at the regional level, and also the need for local jurisdictions to address connections to regional systems in the comp plan. Again, these systems do not end at the boundary of the jurisdiction. Move on to the next slide. And in the 21st century, there's an additional scale of concern that's emerged called the mega region. And this is as we see, issues like water supply, severe weather events impacting not just communities, regions, but having mega regional impacts in their effects. So this figure is from the Regional Plan Association, which has done a lot of work in this area. And it's interesting, it shows the front range from Denver, looks like down to Albuquerque as an emerging mega region. So part of this is to think about the place of the community in the larger region and mega region. And now we'll move on to part 3. So go to the next one. This is the third major section of the book. In keeping with our strategic focus on implementation, chapter 13, implementation, is one of the longest and most substantive chapters of the book. Other chapters cover consistency and coordination in the comp plan document, designing and communicating the plan to effectively connect with community members, and maintaining and updating the plan after plan adoption. And the final chapter conveys some thoughts on how we think the comprehensive plan may evolve in the future. So let's go on to the next slide and look a little more closely at chapter 13, which covers the components of an effective implementation section of a comprehensive plan, the goal of which is to translate that community vision and goals Rocky referred to into specific directives for action. So some aspects of this are strategies and priorities for action, policy guidance to incorporate comp plan goals into operations and decision-making, identifying funding and other resources needed for implementing, and also establishing accountability, specifying responsibilities, timeframes, and measures to monitor progress over time. And this chapter also, also introduces a model for an integrated approach to implementation. And we call this model levels of implementation model. It begins with community engagement and plan development and implementation as a necessary foundation. You hear us emphasizing this throughout. So the levels are arranged in approximate degree of difficulty, from level 1, revising development codes, ordinances, and incentives. Level 2, using a plan to guide capital improvement planning and annual budgeting. Level 3 is aligning internal work programs and decision-making, which is more difficult sometimes than we think it might be. And the most difficult is level 4, leveraging additional resources by engaging external partners in implementation. A successful implementation program, I wanted to spend a little bit of time on this because it's really important, applies these different levels in complementary, synergistic ways to achieve desired outcomes. So let's move on to the next. Chapter 14 addresses internal consistency and integration and external consistency and coordination, which are key attributes of a successful plan. So internal consistency, that means that the comprehensive plan contents are consistent and integrated, that the comprehensive plan is consistent, you'll hear the C words a lot here, with other jurisdictional plans and vice versa, and consistency between the comprehensive plan and implementing regulations. External consistency means consistency with the plans and policies of other levels of government and coordination with the plans of adjacent jurisdictions. And by the way, all these concepts are rooted in the plan attributes that I described that are part of the comprehensive plan standard for sustaining places. So moving on, let's take a closer look at internal consistency and integration. This diagram shows a model process in which the comprehensive plan document, the strategies and actions it contains, and implementing plans and regulations like the zoning code, functional plans, and sub-area plans are fully consistent with the policy framework that's set by the comprehensive plan. The comp plan is really an umbrella plan for the family of plans and regulations that make up the jurisdiction's planning, and they all need to work together. And they all need to follow the direction that the comprehensive plan sets. So one of the important things to do in implementing the comprehensive plan is to look at your zoning codes, regulations, and various functional plans, sub-area plans, et cetera, and update them as necessary to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So let's move on to chapter 15, which is designing and communicating the plan. And as it says, it covers methods of designing and communicating the plan to replace some of the older, more traditional methods that we're familiar with. You know, I go a ways back in planning, and back when I started doing comp plans, they were printed documents, three-ring binders or whatever. They typically had lengthy lists of policies organized by element and very little in the way of graphics other than maps. But that model has really changed in the 21st century. And it really depends on effective communication. That's essential throughout the planning process, ending up with a final plan document that is graphically compelling, written in clear and engaging language, and presented in user-friendly formats, which obviously go beyond the traditional paper document and even its digital successor, the PDF file we're all familiar with, to include accessible, interactive, and online platforms. So let me give a couple of quick examples here, if you move on, Rocky, that we cover in the plan. One is the Stearns 2040 Comprehensive Plan for Stearns County, Minnesota. It's a rural community, but I was really blown away. I think it's a really good example of a well-organized and graphically compelling comp plan document. You can see it's organized around 5 pillars. There are focus areas for strategies and recommendations for each of the pillars. And it's all presented in a very graphically accessible, compelling format. And then another good example, if you go to the next one, of the comprehensive plan online. This is the big picture comprehensive plan for Huntsville, Alabama. It's interesting that some of these smaller jurisdictions are really doing some, well, Huntsville is probably fairly large in Alabama, but they're doing some interesting things. And so this one's an example of a user-friendly online format. So some of its noteworthy features, they include a well-designed landing page. That's what you see here. I think there's an invitation, welcome from the mayor, a quote from the mayor on it, and an invitation to users to explore plan contents by clicking on 4 tabs, principles, policies, places, and process. You see those across the top. Each of these links to more detailed information on the plan. So you can access the plan to the level to which you're interested. So let's move on to the next, which is chapter 16, maintaining and updating the plan. A fundamental premise of this book and of the comp plan standards for sustaining places that preceded it is that the comprehensive planning process continues beyond plan adoption to include ongoing implementation activities, monitoring progress, and regularly updating the plan to keep pace with change. Again, all with community engagement. And thanks to Rocky, who came up with this idea, the plan identifies two ways of monitoring progress. The first is implementation monitoring, which involves tracking whether strategies and actions specified in the plan are actually being carried out. And the second is performance monitoring, which uses targets, benchmarks, or indicators to measure the extent to which implementing these strategies and actions is actually realizing plan goals. So is the comp plan having impact in the real world? So here's a good example of performance monitoring. Next slide, Rocky. Yeah. It's from Lincoln and Lancaster County. Actually, Lancaster. They say Lancaster here in Pennsylvania. It's probably Lancaster County in Nebraska, who annually publish a community indicators report to monitor change and assess whether assumptions in the combined city comprehensive plan, the city and county together prepare and regularly update a comprehensive plan, remain valid, and whether its goals are being achieved. The indicators are organized into 6 categories: growth, economy, environment, housing, transportation, and recreation. And there are several dozen indicators total amongst these different indicators. So the graph at the bottom, and they all have benchmarks as well, benchmarks and indicators. So the graph at the bottom of the slide shows an example of an environmental benchmark, in this case, preserving riparian, floodplain and stream corridors, and indicators to measure whether or not this benchmark is actually being achieved. And so these indicators are building permits issued and cumulative acres of conservation easements in the 100-year floodplain. So we'll move on now to the final chapter of the book, which is a future of the comprehensive plan. And this chapter provides our thoughts on directions in which comprehensive planning must evolve if it's to effectively address those critical 21st century challenges I started with. So in this chapter, we identify 5 key directions, and we know there are others, and we actually suggest 1 or 2 more, but we focused in on 5 key directions in which we think comprehensive planning practice can and must evolve to yield truly sustainable, resilient, equitable outcomes. So you see the 5 directions listed here. I'm going to just give just what we say in the book about each one. Equity and engagement. The comprehensive plan of the future will advance the principle of interwoven equity, that's from the comp plan standards, by giving voice to and providing for the needs of all community members. This really rose to the top as we developed the book. Second is climate change mitigation and adaptation. The comprehensive plan of the future will set the direction for communities to address climate change, the existential environmental threat of the 21st century. Third is systems thinking, which we've referred to. The comprehensive plan of the future will embed systems thinking in the planning process, the substance of the plan, and plan implementation. They'll be seamless in the way that they think about systems. Fourth is people-centered technology. And we didn't say much about technology in this presentation. Rocky referred to it if you saw that drivers of change a diagram, but technology, smart city technology and applications are really, as we know, are really changing the face of planning, the practice, and will do so even more so in the future. So what we think is important is that the comprehensive plan of the future not be driven by that technology, but harness that technology to engage and serve the needs of the community. And finally, as we've emphasized throughout, the comprehensive plan of the future will apply new approaches and tools to translate the community's vision and goals into measurable results through implementation. So we provide examples of what these themes might mean in terms of policies and practices the comp plan of the future could include. So I'm not really going to get into these here, but I'd rather end with a question for discussion. I'm sure hopefully we'll get into some discussion and questions in a minute. What are your thoughts about the future of the comprehensive plan? I also want to end with a quote from the famed anthropologist Margaret Mead, who said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And the comprehensive plan has had a mixed track record of success and impact at best in its history, but we really think there's potential to bring that to the next level. And I think that quote from Margaret Mead really captures that potential of the comprehensive plan of the future. So with that, we'll end and open it up to this for discussion. I think, Rocky, actually, there's one more slide here. Go to the next slide.
Yeah, we actually have two more slides. I'll show those quickly, and then Lauren, we can go to you for facilitating our discussion after this. So one is here's how to access the book. It's going to come out in December, January. It will come out in 3 formats, so hardcover, soft cover, paperback, and as an ebook, all at the same time. So here's the link to that. Again, you'll be able to access this presentation, I think, for the next 3 months or so here. I might note too, we wanted to really jump into the rich content that we've put together with this, but we've intentionally written the book for usability with three different audiences in mind. One are you guys. So clearly we see this as contributing to people in the practice, so people who are professional planners in allied professions and so on, who have as part of their responsibilities to develop plans, to develop the comp plan. This also has utility for teaching. So for students studying planning, for planning faculty. I just sent a quick note to David. I got an email at midnight last night that a class down at the University of Southern Colorado in Pueblo is going to be using this book next semester. So we're tickled to hear that. And David and I really worked hard on accessible language. So many of you know, when you're kind of taught of communication skills as a planner, to use plain English and so on. And we really kept to that principle, so that this is something that could be used by community groups, different groups of elected officials and so on, who may not have the professional vocabulary, but again, we really work to make this accessible. And then our email contact information here is on this final slide. And as Lauren said at the outset too, you'll also be able to access us through the virtual conference website. So with that, David and Lauren, I'm going to turn off the sharing function here, and we'll move into discussion.
Yeah, and Rocky, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. A great comment came in, a thought on the future of the comprehensive plan. I love this. Opportunity necessity to use the comp plan process and the final document as a tool for, it just disappeared from my screen here, but let me see. Oh, here we go. Excuse me. As a tool for building civic capacity, setting the foundation for all community members to be more actively engaged in all aspects of their local government. And I think that really captures what we're trying to convey through the book. The thing about comprehensive planning, it's really democratic engagement, and it's quintessential what it was meant to be. It doesn't happen at the federal or state levels anymore, but does happen and can still continue to happen at the local level. So that's part of the promise of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, David. And you can see our intentionality throughout the book to really talk about this being a process that helps the community get into the know, to be formally engaged, to be the place where concepts, scenarios, alternatives, options, and so on are studied and brought forward. And as David mentioned, zoom through the whole technology discussion that we have in the book. But in this day and age, I mean, many of you with us this morning probably are aware that the tools we have for being able to disseminate information to community members, decision makers, and so on are just phenomenal, and allow people, I think, to readily understand and grasp concepts to really help shape the plan. And then again, with this initial comment, just to carry through, that this can't just stop at adoption and everyone, pat themselves on the back, that the community is key then with implementation and measuring and monitoring what we do.
Yeah, here's another really good comment from Michelle Teller, I believe. The future of the comp plan should really start to set the framework for all future plans. And I'm not going to read through the whole comment, but I think that's essential. I can't remember. I think I referred to the comp plan being the umbrella plan for all of their plans and regulations. So the idea, she says, is to have the comp plan be robust enough to understand community ideals. That's the vision and goal set by the comp plan. And then that gives you a framework to dive more deeply into each specific topic, a planning topic. That's functional plans, like whatever, mobility, parks and open space, et cetera, as well as sub-area plans, neighborhood plans that then can be prepared to carry that out. So that's and all this keeps community groups moving forward with you. And I think that, that's a really good comment.
Yeah, I should say with that too, I mean, there's an intentionality with our work here too. I mean, we're very aware that planning frameworks differ dramatically state by state across the US. And we're aware of that. We acknowledge that there are some states that have some very sophisticated systems put together that accomplish what Michelle is bringing up here, that again, the comp plan should be the framework for the entire family of plans. But other parts of the country work with softer planning frameworks. And again, we feel they can accomplish this as well. There's nothing to preclude, again, having the comp plan be this umbrella document that David used here, and that everything you do from that, whether it's a park plan that Michelle cites as an example here, that they're all nested within this framework. We are aware, and I, being here in Colorado, know this is a challenge with a lot of our communities here, that there continues to be a practice of developing plans, but not really connecting the dots to how a functional plan, how, a new bicycle plan, a new water management plan, whatever relates to the comp plan, that many times you do see jurisdictions continue to just develop plan after plan after plan. And it's a little challenging, not just for community members, but I think for staff and for decision makers as well, to understand, with an entire collection of plans, which ones are we going to for the guidance and direction. So we very much agree with Michelle's point here, that and the one diagram that David walked us through too, I think provides an example of that. Really use your comprehensive plan as your overall umbrella document. Okay.
So if you have any additional thoughts on the future of the comp plan, questions, please enter them into the chat. We have a few minutes left. And while we're waiting, I do want to make a point. Rocky, you reminded me that I think the two of us in combination were really good combination of professionals to write this plan, because Rocky's whole career has been in the Northwest. It has some of the strongest planning systems, probably has the strongest planning systems in the country, Denver. And I'm a product of the East Coast. I started in New England, where it's all home rule. and I ended up in the mid-Atlantic, and they're very different planning systems. So Rocky was teaching me about planning from the Northwest and the West, and I was teaching Rocky about planning, the quirks of New England and mid-Atlantic planning systems and jurisdictions.
Mhm.
So we having any, Lauren, we having any comments or thoughts coming in? It doesn't look.
Not from what I can tell, but I have a question I can throw
Sure, go
out
ahead.
and get your thoughts on. I was wondering if you could speak to maybe some of the challenges you foresee in integrating the concepts and process you talk about in the book into the comprehensive plan. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know, Rocky, do you want to start that? Or do you want me to? Go ahead, Rocky.
Well, I'll just say this is just kind of the first thing that came to mind. I mean, obviously your political environment is a little challenging, particularly if you're in a setting where there are term limits and your decision makers kind of turn over regularly. So you may have different priorities and areas of emphasis kind of come and go through that process. Another part of the challenge may be having developed something, with a particular set of decision makers at one point in time. And then as new people come into office, they don't necessarily have that history or connection. So that's definitely, I think, a challenge in many communities. And it's part of what we discuss with community engagement. We don't ignore issues like that it is an obligation to inform. I always say, I mean, a key role of the planner is simple, is just to provide elected officials and communities with the best information possible. And that also means giving people history and context. So David, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Well, you know what, I think one thing I would add is just the sheer divisiveness that's tearing at the fabric of our society and our communities these days. And I'll offer out a little bit of hope of this, because, we experienced a little bit of that, back in the days of the Tea Party, back when they were doing, when the Tea Party was ascendant, back when they were doing those regional planning grants that the federal government had, and they were Tea Party members were turning out for those, and they had their own concerns, but it was in such it created such a divided kind of atmosphere. And I guess now it's way past what it was there with social media and everything promoting it. But what I would say is I still think that the local governmental level, the community level, is a place where people can actually get together and find common ground. I remember with some of those meetings where, Tea Party folks would be talking, we'd talk to them and we'd be talking about things and they wouldn't agree. But it's aware that you can at least have discourse at that level. So I think the optimistic aspect of that is that regardless of what's happening at the federal and state level, the federal level I don't even want to think about these days, there's an opportunity to promote constructive community engagement and achieve some of these principles and processes at the local governmental level. And I'll say another word about that, because back when I did plans for like Southeast communities, pretty conservative communities, places like Biloxi, Mississippi. And it was interesting how residents would come together around common issues like transportation. Biloxi, Mississippi, I did a plan post-Katrina, which destroyed their bridges and created traffic gridlock. So one of the highest priorities of everyone was more walkable, bikeable street systems. So some of these concepts resonate across the political spectrum when you get down to that local jurisdictional level.
Well said. I totally agree. And I have hope too that, it's the local community, the neighborhood community where we may continue to have some semblance of civility and just lifts up, I think, the importance of a process such as collaborative plan making in those environments. So.
Yeah, another thing I'll mention is funding and resources and funding. And of course, that's always the limits on funding. We can't, these comp plans, you come out with this great list of stuff and you can't implement it because you just don't have the resources. So a couple of ways of addressing that. One is you really need to prioritize and focus. So you may have long lists, but you need to focus and identify the priorities, what you're going to start with first. Another point I'll make is one of the benefits of a good comprehensive plan is it can attract funding and interest funders. And the third is, and this is just kind of where we are right now, all of a sudden, and this may be just a momentary phenomenon, there seems to be a lot of funding out there for things through through COVID relief funds, through the infrastructure bill that hopefully will pass Congress. So there are resources available now to do things that there haven't been in the past. We have a window, and I think communities ought to try to take advantage of that right now, to think proactively about the future and implement some good stuff.
So I'll just tag on that too. I mean, totally agree. We need to prioritize. I've seen some comprehensive plans that just have laundry lists of actions and so on. That creates a challenge. I'll lift up, I think one of the best examples David and I found was Aurora. We'll double back to that, a local community. I mean, a very rich integrated systems approach to planning there. The initial plan they adopted has 20 actions. So they don't see that as addressing everything, but it's the list of what they see as initial priorities. And they give themselves permission to work through that and then develop the next set of priorities and the next set of priorities, so that they have created something, I think, which is very manageable and digestible. So. All right, Lauren, that might be it.
I think that's it, unless there's any other burning questions that come through the chat. I think we can thank you all for attending, and thank you both, Rocky and David, for your great presentation. It was just very fascinating, and I'm excited to read the book. And I hope everyone has a good rest of the virtual conference.
Yes, and thank you for the opportunity. I think we really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. This was great this morning. So, okay. Bye-bye, all.
Bye.